AI is a terrific tool, but it is not a substitute for your own thinking.
Authenticity is the name of the game right now.
It takes a lot of input for ChatGPT to get to know you. Yep. They're not sitting at your dinner table. They're not hovering over your shoulder. They don't know who you are.
If you're using something that is substantively still AI, you have a serious problem on your hands.
Right. Hi, Harold Simansky of the mbaMission podcast. Artificial intelligence, AI, ChatGPT, it's becoming a regular part of everyone's lives these days. But does it have a place in MBA admissions? Can you use artificial intelligence to write your application essays? What about to edit your resume? Can it help you choose the right business school? How about your post-MBA career? These are questions we're getting daily at mbaMission, and in today's podcast, we'll be giving our opinion on the subject. Hello, Jeremy. Hello, Jessica.
Hello, Harold.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence. First, a disclaimer. This podcast is not created using artificial intelligence. This is
not an artificial Harold.
This is natural intelligence. This is natural intelligence right here.
Innate intelligence.
Okay, Jessica, I'm going to throw it right to you.
I think when you think about it from an admissions perspective, from the applicant perspective, AI is a tool, or maybe a better way to say it is it's a really good starting point, or it can be a good starting point, but it should never be the ending point.
Yes.
And by that, I mean, you can use AI to help you come up with ideas, to help you get started with a draft, to help with some editing.
Yeah, do basic research.
Interview questions, to do basic research. But if you stop with what AI does for you, you'll never, well, I think you have a phrase that says AI can help you be mediocre.
That's right.
So it'll help you be mediocre, and you just don't want to be mediocre in this process. So I'll start with where we're going to end, which is the bottom line is that AI is a terrific tool, but it is not a substitute for your own thinking.
Well, maybe we can break it down even further and say that, let's talk about use cases where the documents or whatever your output is ultimately admissions committee facing, and those where it is not. Harold, which one should we go with first? Admissions committee facing or not?
No, actually, I will have many clients, and sometimes including myself, start using ChatGPT for research. And to sort of pick up on something Jessica said beforehand, if I go now to buy a new TV, ChatGPT is going to be my go-to place. How does that affect business school? Are there similar decisions made along those lines?
Right. And I think we have really in-depth insider's guides that go far deeper into each school, but it can take a lot of time to read them if that's your initial phase. So to say to ChatGPT, give me the top 3 differentiators between Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton, or what are the most popular classes at these schools? That's a good comparison tool. And then I would use our insider's guides maybe to go much more in depth.
I would say the one thing that's important is, the mediocre outcomes of it. You can say, ChatGPT, tell me about the top 6 strategy classes at Wharton, okay? You have to go back and check to make sure they actually are classes.
That's true.
Right.
That's absolutely true.
Like if you're using that, you're putting it in your paper, and maybe that professor left and hasn't been offered for 6 years. Maybe ChatGPT made it up.
Right.
So you always have to be skeptical of something that's out of your control. Right. But I agree, the research piece can be quite powerful.
But it tends to be more surface, more comparison, more of an overview, and then no substitute for our insider's guides, or for going to visit a school, or for talking to students and laying that over as well.
We put together On Track. We have 5, 6, 7, 8 different videos on each school, and none of them were designed by ChatGPT. They were all done by the research of a human being. They're all accurate. There's no question that if you reference something, then you still should personalize it towards what you're doing. You wouldn't say, I outsourced this research to a friend. I outsourced it to a research assistant.
Right.
That's what you're doing with ChatGPT. So you've got to be there is a role, but you've got to be careful.
Right. No, and listen, the reality is it also lends itself to opportunity. I'll tell you exactly what I mean. If everyone is using ChatGPT to do research, many people should be, but they do not use our insider guides. But if they're doing research using ChatGPT, which are free, they're on our website. We have a lot of things going on our website. Please check it out. All of that noted, if everyone is doing research using ChatGPT, what a premium there must be to talk to somebody, to actually have a live person, have a quote in there.
Right.
So can you imagine the admissions committee? They're sitting there reading essay after essay. They sound exactly right because they're all written by ChatGPT. Then your essay comes up and you've actually spoken to somebody.
Right.
Maybe in fact you have a fun essay, and ChatGPT is many things. It's not fun.
It's
It is
not
not
fun.
fun.
Yeah.
Right.
No, at all.
So we start with research. And then let's talk about our own internal research, which is brainstorming. Right? As we think about essays, instead of diving right into the questions, is there a role for ChatGPT in brainstorming? And I would say, yes, but it takes a lot of input for ChatGPT to get to know you. They're not sitting at your dinner table. They're not hovering over your shoulder. They don't know who you are. So if you said to ChatGPT, give me some ideas for what I could write for what matters most to me and why for the Stanford essay, well, they will probably come up with 5 or 6 generic topics. That doesn't mean that's what matters most to you or to you or to me.
Right.
It's so then you have to take your own idea and say, oh, this one actually does resonate. How? And what are examples from my own life? And you have to, so again, ChatGPT can get you started when you're frozen with ideas. Before writing, which I think is going to be where many of you listening to this think about using ChatGPT, let's think about brainstorming. When you sit down with 5 essays or 3 essays for a school and you don't even know how to think about them, maybe that's a place to start with ChatGPT. Say, so what are some ideas? Or even here's my resume, what are some ideas? But again, that's very limiting because ChatGPT is not the person who knows you, who talks to you day in and day out. They're not your friend. They only know the little bit that you give them. So it can trigger you to start thinking. I think it can get you unstuck or give you ideas of what other people have done.
Right.
But then you have to overlay your own abilities and knowledge of yourself on it.
Right.
Yeah. I think when it comes after you've got your outputs and you really know what you want to say, I think it's ironic. You can take a massive step back by asking ChatGPT to write me an essay about how hard it was to start an MBA admissions consulting business. The first few months of that. It's like that's you can get from something where the juices were flowing to something totally generic. One of the ironies I think of as I've seen people submit things through ChatGPT that are clearly ChatGPT is that it could be anyone. It's so vague. It's got a certain vagueness. And then every once in a while, someone will say to me, well, I started with ChatGPT. And I'm like, well, this is so specific now. You've done so much revising and changing that ChatGPT basically wasn't there in the first place. It was like, it served almost no purpose for you. And maybe giving you a rough structure of how to get started. But
I think what it does do with the writing is help you overcome writer's block.
Yeah,
sometimes, as you know, how often do we just throw away the entire first paragraph in a client's essay?
Right.
Well, now they're taking that first step. They're getting something generic from ChatGPT, but it's so much easier to edit than to create.
Yeah.
And so maybe they're using that as their first draft to get them unstuck.
That's right. I actually want to pause here because I think it's an important point. And that is good essays, good applications start with introspection, brainstorming. We as a firm, we spend a lot of time on that. Can ChatGPT help you with that? No, it simply can't. It simply can't.
Yeah, it's not there to have creative thought.
Right.
It's there to reflect other people's thought, and that is not your own.
Right.
That's right.
But what about other positive use cases? Let's be fair to technology.
Yeah.
Other use cases. I mean, have you had applicants who are like who I don't know, maybe. You said you got to truncate this 5-line bullet point down to 2 lines for a proper MBA resume.
Yeah.
You could put this through ChatGPT, get it down, break it into 2 bullet points, dabble.
But then you have to look at it and make sure that
it's
it is
accurate for you.
And impact focused. I did this recently with one of our internal documents that you guys don't know me, but I'm long-winded and detailed, and Jeremy's not. And so we sometimes butt heads on this. And he said to me, this is 4 pages, get it down. And I couldn't, because I like to throw every single detail possible into everything that I do.
Right.
And so I put it in ChatGPT and I said, retain all the key bullet points, but make this shorter. And it got about 85% of the way there. It did a really nice job, but it didn't know all the nuances. And I had to then do a line-by-line comparison with our original document to make sure they hadn't missed anything. So it was great. It got me started on something that I was struggling with. But I still had to spend really several hours fixing it.
Yeah, it's a great example, I think, of the generic nature versus the specific nature, but the generic still having some use. So again, giving credit to technology here. We have a massive bank of interview questions from every single school and every single part-time EMBA program within those schools, and it goes on. And then we've been just harvesting these questions for years and years and years. And again, even those we have to go through and make them, make them specific to our candidates. We can't just say to anyone, so what was it like to be, out of 6 years of manufacturing experience and suddenly transition to strategy consulting? Like, we have to do that. If you wanted to start some basic interview prep, you could say to ChatGPT, give me a list of 100 questions that an MBA might be asked in an interview. And I don't think it would be necessarily indicative of the type of experience that you would have, and they wouldn't be that specific, but it'd be enough to start practicing, enough to get going, right?
And that just keeps coming back to the same point. ChatGPT is or any AI is a really good starting point, but not an ending point.
If you were to only use AI-generated questions, you'd end up at mediocre.
That's right. And listen, ChatGPT does some things very well. It takes a 2,000-word document and it can turn it into a 1,000-word document. Accurately, really pretty good. That doesn't mean that you're done with that, but really it's a great place to be. I'd rather edit 1,000 words than 2,000 words. That's certainly the case.
Right, but you still have to make sure they didn't cut the wrong 1,000 words. So there is some intelligence.
The personality out of it, like it's the personality that's the piece.
I remember when we were first hearing about sort of AI in applications, Jeremy, you at a staff meeting presented an essay that you had asked ChatGPT to write, and you had given it pretty specific guidelines and sent it to us. And it was pretty good. Yeah. But it wouldn't have gotten anyone into business school because it was not fun. It wasn't personalized.
I've tried to sit there with ChatGPT for a while and get it to the level of detail that I like to see in a why Stanford, a why Wharton, a why Chicago, and really push it. Maybe I'm just a dinosaur and I don't know how to push it appropriately. Right. But, can you add more resources? Can you add another class? Can you add a club? Can you add this? And it just doesn't read in a compelling way. It doesn't read like someone who, like a human being who really knows how they're trying to put their argument together for why they really fit. Because again, here's that word, fit. You fit.
Have to fit.
A snapshot of a million Googles doesn't fit.
Right. And that's perhaps the easiest.
Kellogg.
That's perhaps the easiest kind of question to answer for ChatGPT because it's research-based.
Right.
Whereas, Stanford's personal background, how has your personal background impacted a recent decision or action you made in the last few years? Right. Well, ChatGPT won't be able to do that because they didn't grow up with you. Yeah. So if it's struggling to be beyond mediocre for the easiest question.
Yeah. One other place, let's say a school had a super hard character count or word count on an essay, which happens from time to time, and you got to cut out a few words. Yeah, you can use it there. Let's say you want to do a copy edit, but I would even say in circumstances like that, some of the blemishes help you. Like in talking to admissions officers, they don't want to see something that's smooth and has. I remember talking to a Harvard Business School admissions officer who said to me that she doesn't want to see sloppy, but she just doesn't really care about a semicolon instead of a colon. It doesn't bother her. It's part of the flavor of an applicant, and especially if you're an international applicant and English is your second language, you don't need a computer to take out the idiosyncrasies of the way you write or speak.
I would make it even stronger than don't need to.
You shouldn't have it. Yeah, it'd be horrible.
We don't take out, when I work with international applicants, I promise them that everything they submit is going to be clear and then they're not going to be contradicting themselves or using words incorrectly. But do I promise to make them sound like a native speaker? That would be against their interests.
Yeah.
So I certainly am not going to wouldn't want ChatGPT to polish an essay beyond where it would make sense. Because remember that let's say you get to the interview phase with a school with those essays, and then you get to an interview and it's clear that your English, as good as it may be, is not at the same level as your essays, that's going to be a disconnect for the admissions office.
That's right. Listen, in my mind, ChatGPT almost forces you to be interesting. If you think about it, if sort of the default now is going to be sort of mediocre, like I've heard it before, the syntax is certainly going to be very similar. There's not going to be, Ernest Hemingway is not popping out of ChatGPT, right?
Exactly.
David Foster Wallace, there is no ChatGPT. Right. So the reality is how do you become interesting? And that really requires a lot of work, a lot of introspection. And again, things that ChatGPT will not allow you to do. It'll trick you in some ways that you think you're doing a great job. This is a terrific essay. I hit word count. I didn't have to use the magic hyphen.
Right.
The other thing also, maybe this is a transition to our second part if we're ready.
Yeah.
But I mean, schools are running AI checks. Like they are thoughtful about this.
Yeah.
And you know, they've been running checks on recommendations for years and years to make sure that applicants aren't. In fact, in some ways, they've been ahead of AI in that regard.
Right. That's
because
right.
they've been running people's recommendations through checks to see if the voice is their own or their recommenders.
Right.
And so, you know, they're checking. And if you're using something that is substantively still AI, you have a serious problem with your hands.
That actually raises a question that our clients and any applicants might be interested in is, how should you advise your recommender about using ChatGPT or not?
I actually have some thoughts about that, because over the years, what I've certainly seen is recommendations becoming more and more vanilla. The reality is for all sorts of different reasons, one of which now is AI, but other reasons as well, as the entire process has become more systematized, as more people have been applying, as long as there's been a history of people writing recommendations, they become super vanilla. So at the end of the day, what I'm really encouraging applicants to do is just like push much more to the recommender. Basically say, I'm going to give you some ideas about what I'd love for you to talk about, but at that point, don't write anything for them. Just push it to them. We're looking for authenticity. And I think that's really the case with essays. I think that's the case with ChatGPT generally. Authenticity is the name of the game right now.
Yeah.
So if we can be really, really directive for applicants out there, if your recommender comes to you and says, I'm going to use ChatGPT for this, your pushback should be, that's a good place to start, but unfortunately business schools are alert to that, and we're starting to see that we are seeing that those recommendations become quite generic. So if that's where you want to start, that's fine. But could we then meet and go through specific examples or anecdotes that you can put in it to make sure that this is in your voice and really reflects me as a candidate?
I would even go further and say, I really want you to have an efficient process with this. I'd like to, I don't think any of the admissions committees would tell you shouldn't be doing this. I'd like to review some of my major accomplishments with you. I'd be happy to furnish you with a list of them. We can talk about them. But I would really appreciate it if you're here to support me, if you could write this whole thing from scratch and and have it really reflect you. Now, I understand that you can't depend on people, but I think maybe the opposite way of saying that is, if you are going to get to the point, or if you are not going to get to the point where it's largely, you know, your own original output and where ChatGPT is still evident, it's going to hurt my candidacy. Please don't write my letter of recommendation.
Yeah.
And look, to the applicants listening to this, we know that's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
You want to come on to a free consultation with us and role play that conversation, we're happy to help you with it. But it's hard, and we get that. Sometimes you just have to do hard things.
Now sort of moving forward in the sense of what's happening inside the admissions office as far as how are they using artificial intelligence. Jeremy, you started talking about it as using it simply to sort of assess who wrote what, but are there other ways, maybe even more sophisticated ways that they're using it right now?
I think I'm actually going to switch that question around and say that what we're hearing from admissions officers when we've spoken to them and from what we're reading is that they're doing what they can to avoid using it more by challenging applicants to avoid using it. Right. And we see this with questions that have many more subparts that really force you to be specific. Video questions. MIT, your alma mater, has pop-up video questions that you cannot prepare for because they're trying to test your spontaneity, test your ability to think on your feet. And so ChatGPT can't do that for you. It can't even prepare you for that.
That's right.
We can. But
dovetailing on what Jessica's saying, let's think about Harvard Business School for 1 second. For, I don't know, about a decade or so, they had a very long prompt. And then they cut it back to 900 words. It was almost like tell us anything you'd like us to know. It was more
very open-ended.
Yeah, very, very open-ended. That is the perfect kind of essay to be completely abused and ruined in an AI, in a ChatGPT world, right? Like I imagine that they foresaw that question was just effectively out of date. It was like a dinosaur because it was going to invite vague answers. I don't think they were afraid of ChatGPT. I think they were afraid of not getting interesting data, not getting interesting stories. And so they changed it to 3 very short, extremely detailed and complicated, some of these vexing prompts that even you can read them several times and still kind of be like a little bit like, what's going on here? What do they want here?
And things that don't naturally fit together all the time as well.
Yeah, and there are transitions in like eras in those questions. Like how did this experience impact your perspective on this going forward? Like they're all extremely cumbersome and confusing because they don't want individuals to be able to have this big kind of open opportunity. They want people to force them into a box. I bet you they might even, maybe they'll last a year or two and then they'll change because they'll be saying, oh, there are examples online. We're starting to get the generic versions of these.
Right. And 2 of those essays are only 250 words with multiple parts. So it really forces you to avoid being generic. Every single word in there has to be specific to you and add
really
meaning.
Has to count.
And
Jessica and Jeremy, this is not a bad time to pause and say we as a firm have spent a lot of time sort of what I'll say figuring out their HBS essays. There's 3 of them now, as you said, 300 words, 250 words, 250 words. They're very hard. I think at the end of the day, they are very hard in a way that other essays weren't, as well as certainly HBS in the past wasn't. And I have to tell you, through all of our work, many hours of work on all of our parts, and as our entire firm really looked closely at HBS essays, none of us could use ChatGPT to figure it out. The reality is it's very personal, it's very hard, and there is no role for ChatGPT in an HBS essay.
And then I think MIT is another example of a very different way. They have not really changed their application that much, but it involves a cover letter and then a video, and then 2 pop-up, or 1 pop-up video question, maybe 2.
So a recorded video that you can do on your own, and then also a
pop-up video in the middle.
Pop-up meaning like you're going to get a prompt and you have to respond on the spot.
You know, and in fact, let me use this to take a step to the side and talk about the 1-minute MIT video. If you may remember, in the past, there was really no requirements around it. Give us 1 minute. Since over the last few years, they said, give us 1 minute now on your iPhone, 1 take.
1 take, yeah.
No transitions, no music.
Exactly, because back in the past, you can find them on YouTube. It was like these Academy Award quality videos.
It was a creativity exercise, and that's not fair because business school is not about how well you know how to do video editing.
Exactly, and that's the case in my mind with ChatGPT. It's anti-authentic. Is that a term?
It is now.
ChatGPT is anti-authentic. We see from business schools in all sorts of different ways the use of videos, interviewing, that now they're looking for authentic. So this notion here of ChatGPT will make you a better applicant is simply not true because it's going in the wrong direction. You're more inauthentic. You're more artificial, exactly what business schools don't want.
And I think that admissions officers tend not to be of the generation that grew up using ChatGPT. I'm sure some people are, but for the most part, they're not. And so that's not their orientation. They're not going to think about how can we use this. They're going to think about how can I get authenticity from applicants so I can really get to know them. Because their goal hasn't changed. Their goal is to build a diverse class that reflects multifacets and that makes sure everybody at the school has an amazing experience. That's not going to happen if you can't read who someone is because they're too generic.
So as a trend line, I think we could be saying, we would expect to continue to see shorter essay prompts, maybe a little more complicated. We would expect to see more video prompts, which I think that has been a trend. Like there used to be 1 school or 2 schools. I think Kellogg was first, then Yale and Rotman and MIT, and there are a few others.
Berkeley has some now, I think.
Or some of them have video interviews as well, which are effectively spontaneous prompts. Shorter videos, and we interest to see other spontaneous things. Like I wonder if there'll be we're going to call you. We're going to call you at some point in the next like 12 hours. Be ready, or are you free? It's the admissions committee calling, or maybe like we're going to. I would expect that this is significant conjecture here, but nonetheless, I would expect that we might almost get to the point where there's like a rough cull, and then it's like you're all invited to campus, for a day, like almost like a super Sunday day for investment banking or something like that.
The Wharton team-based discussion interview was actually like that if you think about it in sort of the most proxy form. And for those who are not applying to Wharton or not familiar, instead of a one-on-one interview, for Wharton, you actually meet, now it's in a virtual room. It used to be on campus or some other satellite locations, and 4 or 5 of your closest friends, 4 or 5 other applicants, you're solving a business problem together. I understand that it sounds terrifying. It's not a complex business problem. You won't need a calculator
in half an hour
or a spreadsheet in half an hour. It's more a problem like develop a course around these parameters or create a day of orientation. So it's not a business problem. I think is a little bit scarier than it actually is. But there's no way to prepare for that using ChatGPT.
No, absolutely.
And once you're in that session, you're dealing with the variables of 5 other people.
Right.
So,
That's right. Jessica, Jeremy, I'm sorry I have to pause right here. You know who does a great job of preparing people for the Wharton team-based discussion?
Who would that be?
It is us here at MBA
You're
Mission.
absolutely right.
Okay,
We do.
we take 6 of you who've been invited for an interview. We put you in a virtual room, and we actually run it just like you will see if you get a Wharton TBD.
And I will say that although from an admissions perspective, they're not the most dynamic thing that we ever work on with our clients.
Right.
It is my favorite thing because of how completely transformative it is.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
see
high
everyone walk
bid.
in.
That's true.
You see
That's true.
these applicants walk in and they all have this look of terror on their face.
Right.
Yeah.
And an hour and a half later, they are walking out confident. And it is
Yeah.
the fastest and most dramatic transformation we see
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
admissions
I
process.
think
So I
that's
love
right.
it for that
Yeah,
reason.
you see people who go in and it's like everything is about deference and like it's not that we're telling people to be impolite, but no one is prepared to advocate for an idea because they're all afraid they're going to seem like they're being too alpha.
Yeah.
And it's like you get to the point where it's a natural discussion, and that's where you need to be.
And in fact, remember when they used to do these in person, and ours were not quite the same because they were virtual.
Right.
And then when COVID happened, Wharton decided to keep those team-based discussions virtual,
Right.
which means our preparation for it is now exactly the same
Yes,
as the ones
Right.
there. It really helped us.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. And again, to get back to theme here, that is not anything that ChatGPT can help you
Yeah.
with.
Not at all.
It's simply artificial intelligence. Again, it's not artificial intelligence, it's natural intelligence. And that's really what business schools are looking for.
So I said at the beginning we were going to end at the same place, and I don't think we've evolved from that. I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what we did.
That's right.
ChatGPT or AI can get you to mediocre. The AI tool is a really good place to start, but it is meaningless if that's where you finish.
Agree. Okay, then. Well, this is Harold Simansky with Jessica and Jeremy for the MBA Mission podcast.
Thank you.